Hey everyone, this is Mrs. Klosky, and this is our 5th video in the Graphical User Interfaces FontSampler application development. And on the screen you see a sample version of our app, but I have finished the East panel, which contains a color panel. The color panel is using a border layout because a border layout adjusts size according to its content rather than a grid layout, which you see on the other 3 panels here in this middle section, where a grid layout will take the content and distribute it evenly in the space that it has, whereas a border layout will adjust the size of the rows according to the content that it has. In this East panel, in the north, I have a JColorChooser that you might recognize from when we did the AP Picture Lab. Then in the center, I have a button that says Get Set Background Color and Set Foreground Color. It'll work like this. If I click an option in my JColorChooser and I click Set Background Color, and then I choose a different color, set the foreground color, apply that font, and now I've got the font in the foreground color and the background in the background color. And so that's what we're going to start developing right now. I will exit out of my sample, and we're going to start by creating a new class. And the name of this class will be FontColor Panel. We're going to use a superclass of JPanel, and I'm going to go ahead and finish. So, as I mentioned before, we're going to have 2 J buttons, and I'm going to call it BTN Background and BTN Foreground. And with that, I will go ahead and import JVac Swing. I'll stick a star on there in case we need it later. And then I'm going to do a JColorChooser. I'm going to call it Color Chooser. All right. And let's see if we're good to go there, ready to do a constructor. So public font color panel started, and I'm going to first do some housekeeping of setting the layout of the panel of a new border layout. See if I need to import anything. And it looks like I misspelled right there. And then I'm going to put a title on that. So I'll set the border on the panel to that border factory and create a titled border with the keyword color. And now I'm going to instantiate the JColorChooser. So ColorChooser equals a new JColorChooser. All right, notice a little mistake up here. And now it's time to set up our buttons. So BTN Background is equal to a new J button. And this is going to say set background color. I'm going to duplicate this line, and then I'm going to change this for foreground and BTN foreground. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and add those buttons and the JColorChooser to the panel. So I'll do an add, and I'll say my color chooser is going to go in the border layout north. Hate it when I do that. There we go. And I will add my BTN foreground to the border layout center, and then I'll duplicate that and I'll add the background to the south. I'm going to save that and toggle over to Font GUI, and let's see what we need to add here. I'll uncomment the FontColor panel, and let's see, I'll uncomment the color panel here, and I need to add the color panel to border layout, and that goes on the east. All right, and that should be all we need to do to get the GUI to appear, and we'll be handling the action performed and some other things in just a few minutes. So let's go ahead and test this. All right, that's exactly what we want it to look like. So I can click around here and you can see this awkward little preview. If you want to get rid of that, I'll show you how to do that. I don't think it looks terrible. You also have the opportunity to change any values in here. So we will continue on and add some functionality to set these buttons because right now they aren't doing anything. And then we also need to be able to send a message back to the overriding JFrame, which is Font GUI, so that when we click the Set Font button, it grabs and extracts the two colors for the foreground and background colors so that we can utilize it in the J label. So I'm going to go ahead and close. Now I'm going to toggle back over to our FontColor panel to add some functionality because right now the buttons don't do anything. So we need to add action listeners to these two buttons so that they have functionality. And I want to show you a technique, and it's called adding a private inner class to a class that you already have. It's just a technique to avoid creating a bunch of multiple classes when you're only going to use the functionality in just the class that you're writing. So in this case, what we want to do is we want the two buttons to have functionalities. We need them to have an action listener, which means we need to have an action performed, which we can either do by making this panel implement a action listener, or as an alternative, we can write an inner class to do the job. So that's what we're going to do in this case, and I like to stay inside of my class, and you should do that. So I'm just going still inside of my class because it's an inner class, and I'm going to write some code to handle these button clicks right down at the bottom of the current class. So I'm going to say private class color listener. This is a book. Your book likes to use this method a lot. And I'm just naming it whatever I want to name it. And it's going to implement an action listener. All right. And I'm just going to open and close that class. it's going to ask me to import an action performed method with that. And so I'm going to add the unimplemented methods. So when the user clicks on one of the buttons, we need to determine which button was clicked. And the way we're going to do that is the way we've done before, is we're just going to say if e.getSource is equal to btn foreground, then we're going to say btn foreground is going to, we're going to set its foreground color. Okay, and what is the foreground color going to be? Well, the foreground comes from our color chooser. So color chooser, and we're going to just use its get color property. And then I'm going to throw in an else. I'm going to duplicate this line. And then I'm going to just move it down and call it background here. And we'll grab the background color as well. All right, so we get the color chooser's color depending and set the appropriate background or foreground color for the appropriate button when the user clicks the button. Now, you'll notice this is underlined because we haven't really even used it yet, because we did not go and add action listeners to our two buttons. So let's do that right now. btn foreground dot add action listener. And instead of saying this, which is the panel, we'll say a new color listener. Okay, I'll duplicate that. And then I'll say btn background. And we'll add an action listener to that. So now I'm just going to run this and see what functionality I have, or if there are any errors. And so now I'm going to click a color, choose a font, and I'll set the background color. That seemed to work. And then I will choose a different color, set the foreground color. That seemed to work. But when I click set font, my color up here in the label is still black. So I need to have a way to communicate back to our font GUI class the information that came from this panel. And that's our last step. So let's toggle, I'm going to save this if I have it. I'm going to toggle back over to font.gui and look at what changes I need to make. So right now there's no way to communicate back to font GUI. That's the modification I need to make. So I'm going to come above my private class and I'm going to add a public method, and it's going to be called, how about get font colors. Okay, and it's going to return a string, a color array. So an array of colors. Do a quick import here. Oh, come on. There we go. All right, so let's first, so the reason I'm using a color array is because I need to return two colors, one for the background color, one for the forecolor, or the text color in this case. So I'm going to say that the forecolor is going to come first. So I'm going to say color array, and I'm going to call it color list, is equal to, and I'm just going to populate the list based on the colors that are currently sitting on the buttons themselves. So I'm going to say btn foreground. I'm going to get its foreground color and return it for the text color. And then I'm going to say btn background, get background. And that would get its background color. I'm going to throw on a semicolon, and then I'm just going to return this. All right.